So welcome everyone. My name is Daniel Tan of the Community Technical Assistance Center, NYU's McSilver Institute, and I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Supporting Neurodiversity, Sensory Integration Meets Emotional Regulation with Emma Arnoff, licensed clinical social worker from the sensory space. So before we get started, I want to take a moment to orient everyone so you know how to participate in today's event. Please note that upon joining the webinar, you have been placed on mute to avoid any background noises that may distract others from listening to the presentation. If you come across any technical issues during today's event, please chat to the host who will be able to assist you. We would also appreciate if you could take a moment to fill out the brief feedback survey that will appear on your screen after you close out of the webinar, and let us know if you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover. The recording and presentation slides for this presentation will be posted on our CTAC website, ctacny.org, in the next 2 to 3 business days. At the end of our conversation, you will have the opportunity to submit questions for the Q&A portion of today's presentation by utilizing the chat box feature. You will click on the dialog bubble on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen to open the chat feature. In order to ensure that we are able to answer as many questions as time permits, we're requesting that you send in your questions at any point during the webinar, and we will collect them and address them during this Q&A portion later. So in order for you to receive credit for continuing education, you must be a licensed social worker, either LMSW or LCSW, or a licensed mental health counselor. You must be present for at least 75% of the offering. So that means a little bit less than 2.5 hours, but we hope that you can stay around for the whole thing. You must attend using your own unique Zoom link. And you must attend this offering on your computer. Attending this offering on the cell phone is not accepted. Continuing education registration will open the day after the offering. So what you would do is to make sure you create a username and password at the NYU Silver Continuing Education online portal. Again, these slides will be provided for you within 2 to 3 business days for you to reference as well. Once you register, you will click on this specific link. And then you fill in your billing information, you register, you pay the processing fee, and then after registering, you will receive a confirmation with a link to complete the post-event evaluation. Thank you to everyone so far who's been able to take the pre-event evaluation. So once the evaluation is submitted, you will be able to access your CE certificate of completion for this program within 1 to 2 business days from taking the evaluation. You can then log back onto the NYU Silver Continuing Education online portal to download your certificate of completion. So on behalf of CTAC, I'm going to welcome Emma, who is the proud owner and director of the Sensory Space in Poughkeepsie, New York. She leads a team of 12 clinicians and works with children, adults, families, and groups. In the sensory space, youth are able to use sensory supports while participating in play therapy and other psychotherapy approaches. Emma leads workshops for clinicians, schools, parents, and universities. Workshops focus on supporting neurodiversity in families, schools, and organizations. Everyone, please welcome Emma. Take it away.
Hi, guys. I'm so excited to be here and to share with you all about my knowledge of neurodiversity and to learn from you, what you want to share with me. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about how I came to be here doing this presentation and creating the sensory space. Years ago, my son was struggling at school. And while I had worked in the past with lots of different kiddos with sensory needs, it wasn't until it was in my home that I had a different sense of it. He was struggling at school with things like touching the rope, painting. He didn't like anything on his hands. Going to any kind of gathering or party was very challenging for him. He would get very dysregulated very quickly. And it was really hard for me as a mom and a therapist to see him having such a hard time. And I ended up having him evaluated for early intervention. And we were able to get occupational therapy through that experience. And it was then that I really saw the power of combining the sensory integration, the physical approach, with psychotherapy and play therapy. And as I watch my son's anxiety decrease as his sensory integration and his work there increased. And so he was getting OT, but I wanted more for him. I looked in my community to see what was out there, and I couldn't find anything. So I decided to create something myself. And that is how the sensory space was born. As you can see, this is a picture of our playroom from a couple of different angles. We have a lot of tools to help with sensory integration, both to get the body calm and to get the body focused and to get the body moving. And we'll talk all about, ways different tools can support kiddos as we go forward. So this is just a little bit of an overview of where we're going to be going today. We're going to start. I'm welcoming, and I would love you all in the chat to introduce yourselves, tell me or everyone here what brings you here today, where you work, and then we're going to go into neurodiversity, ableism, and the medical model. We'll have a break, talk about sensory processing, have a break, teach you a little bit about all play and some play activities you can use and work with kiddos, and then talk a little bit about supporting parents. So I always like to start my workshops doing something that I would do with my clients here. So I'm going to have everyone here do something called a balloon breath with me. This is from a book called Breathe Like a Bear, which is one of my favorite resources. It has tons of different breathing and regulation options for kids that are really fun. So you're going to take your hand and you're going to put it on your belly, and you are going to breathe in and make your stomach into a balloon. And then you're going to breathe out slowly and let the air out like you would a balloon. So you're going to breathe in deep and hold it, and then you're going to exhale nice and slow. And you're going to do it one more time. You're going to breathe in and out nice and slow. Sometimes when I do this particular breath with kids, they might actually turn themselves into a balloon and do something like, that's totally okay. The goal is not to tell them how to breathe. The goal is that we want them to breathe. So we're going to start, but before we get to the learning, I want to talk a little bit about what to expect for today. There are going to be some breakout rooms and some opportunities to work together. And in those opportunities, I want everyone to be ready to be brave and vulnerable, reflect on your own biases, and to be a little bit uncomfortable. When we learn about ableism a little bit later, we're going to talk about, some self-reflection and better understanding our role in ableism. In any ism, to best understand, we have to do that work on ourselves, and it can be a bit uncomfortable. Also, I want to make sure that everyone has your Post-its and something to write with ready. If for some reason you don't, just make sure you have a piece of paper because we're going to need that for the third activity later. So we're going to get started learning a little bit about some of the terms that we are going to be using today. So we're going to start with the main one, neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is broadly defined as an approach to learning and disability that suggests diverse neurological conditions appear as a result of normal variations in the human genome. To simplify this, what this means is that all brains work differently and all brains are great, right? So there's no brains that are wrong. There's no brains that are deficient. There are simply brains that are different and work differently. So if we want to be neurodiversity affirming in our practice, We want to think about having a philosophy, an approach, and a way to work with clients that is through a neurodiversity lens, meaning we're thinking about all brains as great as opposed to some as deficient or needing fixing. We want to apply process theories, approaches, and techniques that are free of ableism and are working to build the client's individual identity instead of trying to change them. We're going to learn a lot today about how to work with our clients in ways that support who they are instead of trying to change who they are. Neurodivergent is a term you will hear. It means having a brain that functions in ways that diverge significantly from dominant societal standards of normal, meaning neurodivergent brains are ones that operate in unexpected ways based on our societal standards. And neurotypical is the opposite. It's there instead of the word normal, which is a word I try to never use. But it is describing brains that exist in the ways that we expect in our society. Some of the different diagnoses that you may see falling under the neurodivergent umbrella include dyslexia, intellectual disability, Tourette's, autism, ADHD, giftedness, sensory differences, and OCD. You will notice, one thing I just want to point out about language. Sometimes I hear people say things like someone is neurodiverse, but that actually is just describing a variation of different kinds of people rather than saying a person is neurodivergent. So when we're talking about someone who maybe has one of these diagnoses or a brain that is operating in a different way, we're going to describe them as neurodivergent. I heard someone's asking me to slow down, so I'm going to work on that because I want to make sure that I am speaking in a way that everyone can take in. So I appreciate the feedback. So I want to talk a little bit about identity first language. As I said earlier, we do not see neurodivergent brains as less than, but rather we see them as different. And what's a beautiful thing that's happening right now is that neurodivergent people are owning who they are as part of their identity, as opposed to seeing it as something that they have or a disorder that they have. So we are moving from saying a person with autism to saying an autistic person based on feedback from autistic people who want to incorporate that who want to say, I am autistic. This is who I am, not I have something wrong with me called autism. We can also say ADHD or neurodivergent person, terms like that. It's more affirming to the identity of the neurodivergent community. So what we might have learned in the past is person first language, which would be person with autism, as opposed to identity first, which would be autistic person. So Kiara is going to pull up a poll now for everyone, so we can get a sense of what everyone has been taught in the past. I think it should pop up. So you can all vote and let us know what you were taught in school or in life. Looking like a lot of people were taught person first. I know I was taught person first when I was in school, and it's an adjustment to learn to shift the way that we speak. We were actually told using an autistic person when I went to school was offensive or incorrect, and now it's the way that we want to be speaking. So it's a big shift. So it's looking like me, most people were taught person first language. We have a few who are taught identity first and a few who were not taught either. I'm going to guess that some of the people who were taught identity first probably graduated school more recently than I did, but it's interesting to think about how we evolve as therapists and as thinkers. So I'm going to move on now. I'm going to stop. Looks like most people voted. So I'm going to talk about the terms awareness versus acceptance. I really got connected to these terms a couple of years ago when I was doing some workshops about Autism Awareness Month. And a client I work with who is autistic explained to me that the autistic community and the neurodivergent community prefer acceptance and not awareness. She said, Emma, I don't want people to know I'm there. I don't want people to know I exist. I want people to ask me about my experiences. I want people to know me and know my community and what it's like to be us. And so that's how I think of the difference between awareness and acceptance. Acceptance is learning about autism or neurodivergence from autistic or neurodivergent people, finding strength in diversity and creating more inclusive environments. So now we're going to talk about ableism, which is something we have to understand, investigate in ourselves and the people around us to best be neurodiversity affirming. So ableism is the discrimination of and social prejudice against people with disabilities based on the belief that typical abilities are superior. At its heart, ableism is rooted in the assumption that disabled people require fixing and defines people by their disability. So to me, when I think of ableism, especially when I think of it in terms of neurodiversity, we want to be really thoughtful that we're working with the clients we have and not trying to make them into something that feels more comfortable for us or for the people around them. And we want to really help them feel empowered and confident and, productive in ways that embrace who they are. So things that we can do that can be ableist without realizing, assuming a disabled person needs help when they haven't asked for it, or that they can't do certain tasks on their own. I think about when someone offers me help before I have an opportunity to try something myself, and it makes me feel incompetent or like I'm, someone doesn't believe in my ability. And so we want to be really thoughtful of that. Sometimes it's using ableist expressions in conversations, like it was the blind leading the blind in there. Dismissing an opinion from someone because they are autistic or trying to correct their opinion to match yours. I remember a teenager I worked with looking at her mom who was not believing her version of events of something that happened. And she said to her mom, just because I'm autistic doesn't mean I don't know what happened. And I think it's important that we think about that and we realize that we don't have to change someone else's view or think their view is wrong because of how their brain works. And the last one on this list is talking about a neurodivergent child or person in front of them as though they are not there. So that would mean me talking to a kid's parent and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe they did that, and yada, 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 with them right in front of me, as if they're not taking in what I'm saying and they're not a person with the autonomy to care about what I'm saying and want to be a part of it and not want to be talked about as though they don't exist. So we're going to get into our first breakout room activity. If you remember, I started with talking about being able to get vulnerable today. And that is what we're going to do in our first breakout room. So when you get put in your breakout rooms, I want you to make some time to introduce yourself, share what you do and what brought you here today. And then I want you to talk about your own ableist experience. So there's a risk of needing to fix or cure something that is actually a part of a person, of who a person identifies as. And this is a way we can be implicitly ableist. So I'm hoping you can all think about a time together when you might have done this and what you would have done differently. Some examples I can think of is times I might have said to a kid, look at me when I'm talking to you. Or, I did a workshop at a school and some of the teachers were talking about how they say eyes on me, ears on me, things like that, and realizing that those are ableist because we are assuming every kid can and feels comfortable doing those things. So we're going to give you about 10 minutes to spend some time together in a breakout room discussing these questions for everyone. So Kiara is going to bring the poll up for us. And we are going to think about our comfort level in doing that activity in your breakout room. So if everyone could rate your comfort level on a scale of 1 to 10, so 1 being the least comfortable and 10 being the most, how it felt to get vulnerable about ableism together. Definitely looks like we are more towards the higher numbers, that 7, 8, 9 range, which makes a lot of sense, right? We're talking about something difficult for us and that we have to reflect on our own part of. And that is something that can be very uncomfortable to do. But as clinicians, we know that in discomfort is when we grow and we learn. So I'm glad everyone was a bit uncomfortable, but maybe not all the way to a 10 in that activity. I wanted to answer a question that was in the chat before we got to that activity. And then maybe see if anyone wants to get vulnerable and share a little bit about what you spoke about in your breakout room. Someone asked if we should ask clients what they prefer when it comes to first person language. I think that is definitely very important. We don't want to assume that someone wants to identify a certain way. However, when we don't know, or we're describing neurodivergent people at large, the neurodivergent community in different organizations has stated that this is what they prefer. So that is neurodiversity affirming to come from that place. If you look at ASAN, which is the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, made up by autistic people, they explain that that identity first language is preferred by their community. I would love to hear if anyone either wants to raise your hand and speak or type into the chat some examples that came up of times that you were realizing that maybe you were doing something ableist without awareness. Don't everybody raise your hand at once. I see Michelle, you have your hand up. I'd love to hear what you have to share.
Well, I learned today that being gifted falls into this category. I shared with the group that I was the gifted child. And for a long time, I just couldn't relate to my classmates because they didn't grasp things as quickly as I did. And every time there was a group project, I think I dreaded that because I was like, oh, they're going to screw it up. And it took a long time to really understand it. What I didn't share in the group is I ended up with a traumatic brain injury, and it led to a form of amnesia for a short period of time. And for the first time, I realized what it was like for my brain not to work. And it's given me a whole new perspective to just dial it back and sit with people and just listen to them instead of making my assumptions that they're not as smart or, as quick as me. And I think it's been healthy too.
That's beautiful that you took something so challenging and made it give you a awareness of all the different types of brains. And, it is really interesting with twice exceptional or gifted kids that we work with. Sometimes they are so far ahead academically, but socially they might not be. And there isn't really a right place to put some, in terms of the systems that we have in place. And it can be really isolating to be a gifted child. So I think both, can both, feeling like people don't think you're smart enough or feeling like people don't understand the level at which your brain is thinking so quickly can be challenging in social situations. So thank you for sharing. Some things that I'm seeing in the chat. Making a cake with my dyslexic daughter and assuming she had trouble with reading the directions. I think that sort of goes into, about that ableist idea of assuming people need help, right? We assume because they're dyslexic, they're having trouble with the directions, but maybe we didn't ask, and maybe it's something else. I love this. I've described one of my young autistic clients as non-compliant in the past, where in reality, he's more likely struggling to engage with me on struggling to express himself rather than being non-compliant. I really appreciate, Laura, you sharing that with everyone, because that's a really hard one to come out and say. But I think we've probably all had moments where we felt a kid was non-compliant or not listening or not cooperative or rude or manipulative. And really, they were behaving in ways to express a need that wasn't being met. I really like this one too, being frustrated at a different level of social skills coming across as rudeness. We actually changed the name of our groups that we do here. We used to have social skills groups, and we actually changed the name to social connection groups, because even using terms like social skills can say that there is a certain level of skill we're trying to achieve or teach, rather than being with people in the way that they are and having the opportunity to connect as that. So I really appreciate all these shares. I'm going to just look through and see if there's one more to share, and then we'll move on. Stephanie shared one that that resonates with me, and I think would resonate with a lot of parents I work with. Expecting my son to be someone he is not, rather than accepting and embracing his gifts. I can appreciate that as the mother of a neurodivergent child and as the clinician who works with neurodivergent children. Sometimes it would just be so much easier for us, for me as mom, for me to be able to take, when I described my son early on, going to a birthday party was so challenging, and all I wanted was it to be easy. And so there's not, that feeling of wishing it was easier makes a lot of sense, but learning to embrace the greatness of what you have. And, maybe my son didn't love a birthday party, but boy, when we got home and it was just the two of us, what we got to share and be, and then learning ways to navigate those things together, which we'll get to a little later. But I think that's a really important one to share, is that, of course we want life to be easier, and we have to give that grace to ourselves. And then we have to say, how do I embrace this amazing child I have? And how do I, help them be the best they can and love themselves as that? So I'm going to go back to the slides, but I love all of these shares. I see another parent sharing that they have a gifted child and that they were placed in, I believe, special education. And again, that is a whole another thing that we talk about here a lot, is how do we advocate for our kids when there might not be the right place for them? So thank you all for such great shares. And maybe at the end, when we get to question and answer, if we have more time, we can talk about some more of those stories. And again, thank you for being vulnerable. That is not easy to do with some people you probably just met here today, online. So hold on, we're skipped. What happened here? There we go. Okay. So I'm going to talk about masking. Masking involves hiding aspects of yourself or pretending to be like someone else. Masking neurodivergence is not manipulative. It is implemented out of a survival response, an inability to feel that being yourself is acceptable. I have an adult client I work with who has recently come to realize that they are autistic. And one of the hardest things they've come to realize is that they spent most of their life masking, and they spent their life being diagnosed as anxious and depressed. And we're coming to realize that anxiety and depression may be rooted in having to work so hard to mask who she was, to fit in right, to sit still, to be what was expected, instead of being allowed to exist in the world as she was, which she's starting to do now. But it's different as an adult than a child. And I believe we are going to give you guys another poll about masking, which Kiara is going to bring up for us. We would love, you're going to get a poll that's a short answer, so you can type in an answer and then we can see everybody's. To think of examples of a time you might have noticed someone masking, or a time when you yourself had to use masking. And then we'll get to see all of these together. That might look like forcing yourself to sit still, pretending you liked a non-preferred task, making eye contact in ways that felt uncomfortable, seeing someone do that, seeing a child pretending to be enjoying a social situation they don't want to be a part of while they feel anxious, things like that. I see our answers are rolling in. Give it a few more seconds and then maybe we'll pull up some of your answers so we can see them. I'm happy to see so many people answering this poll, because it tells us that we're all able to make time to reflect on our experiences with masking or others' experience. Kara, if you want to pull up the answers we have so far, I think we can do that, so we can share with everyone what we got.
Are you able to see what I'm sharing?
No, I believe there should be a link that only you are able to view, and then you could screen share that specific link that that pops up once you click on it. So I can stop the share now so that you can, there you go.
Wonderful. Social situations that are forced, like a work retreat. Oh, that's a great example. That's sort of the adult version of having to be out at recess and participate in a certain way. A child played with cars when a friend came over, but never touched them otherwise, had no interest. So yes, like he liked to crochet. Me too. I like to knit, but I appreciate that sometimes we pretend we like something. Hugging, what a good one. something I was really conscious of with my son, was when certain family members or people would say, give me a hug, or you can't leave without hugging me. I hear you. But if he says he doesn't want to hug, we're gonna go with that. And hugging is not a requirement. It's something that we choose to do, right? That's how we teach children to listen to their bodies from a young age. Tried to hide my anxiety, pretending I wasn't about to have a panic attack. Yes. One thing that's really interesting when you think about neurodivergent people, nobody who goes to therapy because they are neurodivergent. People go to therapy for the symptoms of being neurodivergent, meaning you go to therapy because you are anxious living in the world as an autistic or ADHD or neurodivergent person because the world isn't designed for you, as opposed to because you're autistic, right? So I think I always tell clients that anxiety and anger and depression and frustration are also often the siblings of neurodivergence, because they come along with it. Making myself sit still, attempting to really concentrate on a conversation so I can ensure I don't get off topic. Something I think a lot of people might already know. If you are neurodivergent, you often have a real skill for focusing on topics that are of interest for you, but it's really challenging to stay on focus in non-preferred tasks. Masking shyness by pushing myself initially to be assertive. I think that's a really, interesting one to think about, because, this is something that's actually come up with my team of therapists here. I always say that the people who talk less or who are maybe less inclined to share, that doesn't mean that they're not as important at the meetings. If everybody talked as much as I do, I don't think that anyone would be able to get a word in. And it's really important, especially as therapists, to also be listeners, right? We don't, so I think those skills, there's not one being more quiet or being more loud. One isn't better than the other. They're just complementary. Yeah, masking a lot when they have to be around friends. One thing that can be seen as ableist is forcing a neurodivergent child to be friends with neurotypical peers, or expecting, your child to be friends with your friends' children. That doesn't always work out. They may do better with other neurodivergent children who appreciate them. If you ever come and see one of our social skills groups, you might see one kid in a barrel and one kid on the swing and one kid on the trampoline, and they're not even interacting with each other in the ways that you might expect, but they are, and they are loving being in the room together. Being stressed at work and hiding it, that is probably what a lot of neurodivergent people feel all day long, right? Church or social settings with my son, that's a great one. And wanting him to behave like other children so he does not draw attention. Church and religious institutions come up a lot. I have some clients that it's really been helpful for them to learn to sit in the back at church or other events like that, so that they know where they can go for a break when they need to. Pretending to conform. When I go into a home that is in rough shape, I pretend that I'm not bothered by it or it doesn't affect me when inside I'm screaming. That's a great example, because you might walk into someone's home and think that it has a smell, or, the sounds or something is so uncomfortable and you're forcing that. That might be how a neurodivergent person feels when they walk into any room. So what a great way to cultivate empathy. So I think we will, sweet 16th, yeah, any big celebrations, birthday parties. I'm going to give some tips when we get later in the presentation, if you do want to go to those events, but I think this is such a great list. And again, thank you all for being so vulnerable. We can go back to the slides. There we go. Okay, so you don't have to take all of this in. I just wanted to do a brief review of thinking about the medical model while we're talking about moving forward in all of these social, emotional, progressive ways. That doesn't mean that everyone is with us. Often the medical field has not kept up with the, therapeutic field. So it's something we have to be aware of when we're helping our clients, because for them to get the diagnosis that they might need to get the supports and services that they might need for their lives, they still have to know how to navigate the medical model, even if it's not something that we feel is ideal, right? Like if you look at this, the number of times we see the words persistent deficits, right? That's how we are assessing in the DSM for autism spectrum disorder. While so I always go over this with clients or explain this, especially ones who could benefit from getting a diagnosis of autism and ultimately getting services like OPWDD or things like that. I want them to know how to advocate for themselves. So it's kind of like being bilingual, right? Like we want to teach the social, model that we're working from, but we also want our clients to be aware that the medical model is still operating in this way. Talking about deficits in communication, social, emotional reciprocity, and relationships. And speaking of being bilingual, we actually often need to be trilingual as we think about education, right? So this is just an example of the education model in New York and how we are assessing our young students for disabilities. Again, significant delays or disorders. I remember when I had my son assessed for early intervention, he had to either have the 33% delay in one functional area or a 25% delay in two areas. Did I want to say that my son had a 25% delay in fine motor skills and a 25% delay in social regulation or emotional regulation? I didn't necessarily feel that that was a descriptor of him, but by understanding that would get us services, it was worth, making sure that we did get those diagnoses and those, as many people see them as labels, but that's how we get our clients services. So it's really hard, right? We have to work within systems that might not use the language that we do, but the services are so critical for our children's success. And so we want to make sure that we're teaching our clients, how does education work? How does the medical model work? So that we can make sure that they're getting, that everything that they need in all arenas of their life. So we're going to talk a little bit about stimming. The term stimming is used as an abbreviation for sensory self-stimulating behaviors. Stimming usually involves repetitive body movements or noises. Examples include hand flapping, spinning in circles, opening and closing switchers or drawers, tongue clicking, etc. And autistic and sensory children frequently engage in stimming behaviors. This is healthy and helps them to regulate their sensory systems. Stimming behaviors should not be stopped. It may decrease if other sensory needs are being met, but if not, it's okay. And as supporters of our neurodivergent clients, we need to destigmatize stimming. Stimming is regulation. If we take regulation away from our children and then expect them to behave, that seems rather unfair. Oftentimes, we have worked with kids here who, through getting the sensory input they need or having their sensory needs met, their stimming may decrease, but it is not the goal. And it is not what we're striving for. And if we can learn to teach people about stimming and, what stimming's purpose is, we don't have to force this children's stimming to stop. We can teach the people around them what's happening. So I think we are going to give everyone, is this the place where I wanted to take a break? I believe. Well, I'll finish these 2 slides and then we'll take a break. So just something to be very cognizant about when we are talking about neurodiversity, being neurodiversity affirming and ableism. We can't think about ableism and neurodivergence without thinking about intersectionality, right? Because the experience of neurodivergent people who are different genders and races and cultures are different that, you know, from person to person. So I just wanted to include just a couple of important facts to think about in terms of intersectionality. So Black children usually obtain a diagnosis for autism 1.5 years later than white children after many more provider visits. And they have found that compared with white children, Black children were 36% less likely, and Latino children were 56% less likely to be diagnosed with ADHD. Now, it's important to think about why this is, right? So there's many reasons, but some would include the fact, first of all, access to services and, you know, good medical care. Also, you know, very appropriate mistrust in the medical system based on our history. And also stereotypes of Black and brown children, and the fact that we might see something as a behavior in one child that we might think of as autistic in another. When we think about the way that autism has been portrayed, we usually think of a young white male, and that is not at all representative of the gamut of what autism and neurodivergence looks like. Also, different cultures around the world and different, you know, religions and all of that have a big, you know, part in families accepting these ideas or working within them or, you know, seeing them how we might. So it's all really important as clinicians that we keep that in mind. Also thinking about it in terms of gender, many more boys than girls are diagnosed on the autism spectrum. More than 4 boys for every autistic girl, according to the latest numbers from the CDC. But that might not be because more boys have autism. Often autism in girls just looks different from the stereotype of autistic behavior. So some doctors might not diagnose it. We've been seeing this a lot here with the young girls we work with. One great example is, you know, a sign of neurodivergence or autism is hyperfocus on preferred tasks or things, right? But if a little girl's hyperfocus is on dolls or horses, we might not think that it's a sign of autism because it feels socially, right? But that doesn't mean that they're not fixated in the same way someone else might be. And that doesn't mean that's, you know, that's not to judge that, but it's important to notice it, because if we don't, that could lead to masking later as that young girl grows up. So as everyone's coming back, I just noticed a couple of other questions in the chat. One asked about if someone, here, what did I have that I like this question? Is it possible for an autistic person to have minimal autistic traits and have socialized themselves into appearing neurotypical? Absolutely. I think that's what a lifetime of masking can do. The client I was describing earlier is just coming to realize that that has been their life. And what's, you know, come out as looking like anxiety is actually a reaction to having to be someone that didn't feel comfortable for a lifetime. And now we are just sort of getting back to the roots of who she was when she was young, that she was covering up to begin with. So yes, absolutely. And it can be some really powerful work to realize that. So I'm going to move forward. We're going to talk a little bit about sensory processing differences. You'll see me use the word sensory processing differences and sensory processing disorder. I much prefer sensory processing differences, but I use both because you will hear both. So sensory processing differences, also called sensory processing disorder, SPD, affects how the brain processes sensory information, which can include things a person can see, hear, smell, or touch. It also includes movement, body awareness, and awareness of internal states, such as hunger and pain. So we're taking in stimuli in a different way. So maybe smell is stronger or hearing is stronger, and we'll get to some of those other senses as we go, and processing them in a way that is different from a typical brain or person, how a typical brain or person might process those same sensory stimuli. So some signs of sensory processing differences that you might see. Babies who are inconsolable or seem constantly uncomfortable. My son is a great example for this. I remember calling my pediatrician and saying, my son won't stop crying, there's something wrong. And my doctor saying, who's not my doctor anymore, saying, well, babies cry, right? But I knew it wasn't a regular cry. I have twins. So my other son, who also cried plenty, was not crying in that same way. So just, when we're experts on our own children, right? Or the parents you work with are experts on their own children. If they see something like this, believe them. Struggles with making friends, difficulty with circle time or sitting still. I hear all the time in my office about how hard circle time can be. Covering ears, avoiding and seeking messes, difficulty with sleep, overwhelmed by crowds, picky eaters, avoidant of certain textures, and easily frustrated. So there's different types of sensory responders, and that doesn't mean everyone fits into one category. Some people can be a mix of all, but I just wanted to review what the different categories are. So you have your sensory over responder. That's probably what people most typically think about when we think about neurodivergent kids and people. We think of someone with their hands on their ears who are taking in sensory input too strongly, who don't like certain smells or feelings or touches, and have a very large reaction. Then you have your sensory under responders. That might be your kid who is sort of slouched and having trouble having the motivation to move their body in any way, or who is having, or a kid who maybe gets hurt a lot and says that they don't feel it, or who is never cold, even on a very cold day. You have your sensory seekers. We have a lot of those here and we love them. That might look like my kiddo who runs into our padded wall over and over again to get the input that he wants. That might look like someone who wants to touch everything. We have a kid who will walk through the office and touch each and every little thing every time and loves that. And then you have your sensory avoiders who don't want to touch. I had a kid and, we worked for a very long time just to be able to touch things and make a mess. And that was so that he could feel more comfortable holding different things and being in different environments. So that's, a sensory avoider. And like I said, you can be a combination. You can definitely be a sensory seeker who's also under responsive. You can sometimes be under responsive to certain sensory stimuli and over responsive to others, right? Like maybe sound really bothers you, but touch doesn't. But we thought we could take a poll here and see what most people would identify themselves with. So we're going to pull up a poll to see what type of sensory responder you see yourself as, and you don't have to choose one. You can choose the ones that fit you best. So Kiara's going to pull that poll up. Looks like we have a little bit of everything here today, which I love. What a nice neurodiverse group we have. So definitely a mix. It seems that we have maybe a little more over responsivity than under, but otherwise it's interesting to see. And I think that's, an important thing to see, right? That in our group of clinicians here today, we're such a mix of these things. So when we're doing our work, we need to be thinking about the fact that our clients are not any one of these things and need supports across the gamut for the different types of sensory responders they might be. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. There we go. We're going to learn about 8 senses today. I'm sure you're probably aware of your 5 basic senses: your visual, your auditory, your smell, your taste, and your tactile system, your touch. A good example for this, just to think about, I had a client on their way to therapy, loves coming here more than anything, would live here if I let her. But her mom got gas on the way and the gas spilled on the side of the car. And she was so disturbed by the smell that not only could she not come here, she had to go home and isolate herself for quite an extended period of time to regulate her system from that experience. So, it can look different for different people, but I think that's a really, an example of how it can affect someone who might be more sensitive to smell. So I'm going to talk to you about proprioception. So we'll call that our 6th sense. We'll have 2 more we'll share together. So proprioception is our sense of body position. We have receptors in our muscles and joints that tell us where our body is in space. So kids that have challenges with proprioception may fall often, have a hard time with walking coordination, and appear not to know their own strength when handling objects. So proprioception, activities that can be helpful in giving proprioceptive input include wall push-ups, pressing into a pillow, tight hugs, animal crawls. Proprioceptive input are like things that make us feel we are being held or pushed or getting strong input. Proprioceptive input is often very calming when a child is hyperactive, upset, or overstimulated. I saw a question somewhere in the chat earlier about, building a sensory room at home and the cost of that. And, something that I always like to think about when I go to schools or other communities, so much of this stuff doesn't require material, like wall push-ups. You can have your kid trace their hand on a wall. Or you could even in your therapy office have them put it on a piece of paper that you put up when they come and just get them to do those wall push-ups. What great sensory input that can give for a child. So the next sense we're going to talk about is the vestibular sense. Sometimes the vestibular and the proprioceptive, it's hard to tell which it is. As long as you have the tools to treat sensory integration and to have input, that's okay if you're not sure which one it is. Our vestibular sense is our sense of balance and movement. Our receptors for vestibular processing are located in our inner ear. When your head is upright, your inner ear receives your body position, and that helps you maintain balance. Children with vestibular processing challenges may experience poor balance, poor movement coordination, dizziness, delayed motor skills, and poor visual focus. So some ways that we can support the vestibular sense: swings, scooter boards, activities on your back or stomach, spinning, trampolines, upside down activities. So vestibular input can be very stimulating and actually helps children get energy or focus on activities that they need. I'm always amazed. We have a large swing in the playroom, and for me, when I take breaks on our swing, I like to rock back and forth and soothe myself. Some of the kiddos we have coming here spin and spin and spin, and I get dizzy watching it, but it actually creates a sense of focus and calm for them. So, the way that that's very much treating their vestibular sense in a way that they need, that I might not understand, but still can support. So we're going to move on to our eighth sense. Oh, before we move on to our eighth sense, we're actually going to watch one of my clients in action, using the tools in this space to get all kinds of sensory input.
Can everyone see this?
That video brings me joy every time I watch it. That client just was able to really take on using, all the tools in our playroom in such unexpected ways to get all kinds of input, and music and rhythm. And he has such amazing rhythm. That is not what I would sound like if I was playing the trampoline drum. But it's just such a combination of things, this where he was sitting, how he was moving, that he was tightly in a space. I mean, just taking a bunch of things in a room and knowing he had the comfort level there to put it together in that way is just, it makes my heart explode a little bit. So we're going to talk about getting more physical in the playroom, or your office or your home. I do this with schools as well. Another example of where we can do such great sensory work without a big expense. So, we want to do work that is heavy, that involves repetitive motion and releases energy for our kiddos, right? But we also want to make it really fun, so that they want to do it. Some of my favorite things include elephant stomps, crab walks, bear crawls. I hate doing those myself, but kids love them. Wall push-ups, and sometimes kids make up their own animal moves. So I'm going to teach you a little bit of a way that I like to mix the physical with the emotional now. So I know we're virtual, but we're going to try this and make sure people have their cameras on so I can see you and see people are doing this. We're going to all get up wherever you are, if you can. If you can't stand up for any reason, we can do a hands hitting version of this. But if you can stand up, that would be ideal. So first, get yourself a little stretch. We've been sitting for a while. Loosen up a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to teach you how to do an angry elephant stomp. So first, we're just going to start with the elephant stomp, which is a wonderful sensory intervention because it has such strong input. You're going to lift up your foot like an elephant and stomp it on the ground as hard as you can. So it's going to look like this. So if everyone can give that a try. Let's do one more of those. Okay, and how are we going to put emotion into it, right? So that it's not only sensory. We're going to make an angry elephant stomp. So you can think of this in your head, and then when you sit back down, I'd love people to give us some comments in the chat of things that you're going to put on the floor that make you angry. Some examples in previous trainings, I've had adulting, bills, my children, my spouse, my job, the state of the world, lots of different things, right? So we're going to take whatever our angry thing is, we're going to put it on the floor, and we are going to stomp on it as hard as we can. All right, so go for it, stomp on it. And if it needs an extra couple pounds, give it to it. And you can sit back down when you feel ready. And if you want to share some of your angry thoughts with us, you are more than welcome to. And Daniel, if we can bring back up the slides as people might be typing in their angry thoughts into the chat. Not too many people typing in. Maybe I covered them all in what I was saying. Old school beliefs, that's a good one. I really like that. Responsibilities, lack of respect, student loans, good one. Yes. We have a lot being really short staffed, rude comments, wedding planning being expensive. I feel that one. Inappropriate curriculum. In a world full of hate, I wish more people could just stomp. Oh, can we make that a shirt, Alice? I love that. Great. I love all these answers. And, you know, it's such a great thing to just give a child or anyone the opportunity to just shout out what they're angry at and stomp on it. You know, I try to sometimes make a habit of doing this on a daily basis so that I can get some release of my own angry thoughts of life and mothering and all of it. So we're going to move on to our eighth sense, interoception. And this is the one that I think can often be most connected to our emotional well-being and mental health. And so interoception is our sense of the internal states of our bodies. It tells us when we're hungry, thirsty, tired, hot, cold, have to go to the bathroom. Children who struggle with interoceptive awareness also may have difficulty with emotional regulation. Think about how your internal body sensations affect your mood, right? When I am hungry or you don't want to work with me. I get very hangry, I get very cranky, and it doesn't serve anybody. I love sleep. The first 3 months of my twins' life, I was not at my best, right? If I'm tired, people around me can usually sense that. In my house, we have a rule: you don't talk to mom until she has her first cup of coffee, because you don't want to deal with me when I'm dysregulated. But we want to give that's sometimes we say to kids, just pay attention or just do this task, or can't you just do this thing? They may be feeling those feelings of exhaustion or hunger or tiredness in ways that they can't describe or even understand. An important thing to understand about interoception is it can both come from, who we are in our brains, how we were wired, and it can also come from trauma. And sometimes it can be something that is part of who we are, and then we also have trauma, and it's only reinforcing of those challenges with interoception. Trauma can be disrupting to the interoception experience, causing difficulty with caring for the body's needs, caring for emotional needs, and living a life where one feels comfortable and regulated. Some people have muted inner experiences, some have intense inner experience, and some have fluctuating. If you think about someone who was malnourished, there's a very good chance that their body is not able to properly let them know when they're hungry. And that is something that they will have to work on within their body to get back, right? So that could be from trauma, it could be from the way we're wired, but we want to be aware that it's there either way. And actually the treatment approaches in terms of sensory integration can be quite similar. So things that can help you with interoceptive awareness can include yoga, mindfulness, breathing techniques, alerting activities. So an example, I have a kid I'm working with, and at school, he sort of go into his head and think about things that he's more interested in, or he can look at his desk and see a picture and focus deeply on that. And his teacher asked me, how can I help him pay more attention? I keep saying, hello, listen, and all of these things. And we talked about alerting activities, right? Whether that's drinking an ice cold cup of water, or going for a walk in the hall, or stretching or moving in some way. Sometimes the body just isn't alert to what's happening around us. And the more we become aware of our internal states through activities like this, the more we can start to advocate for better treating of those states for ourselves. So the more I understand what hunger feels like, the more I can say I'm hungry or I have this need. And that's a really amazing thing when you see kids being able to better understand, whether that's, you can have heightened interoception, you can have where you feel like, tired and hungry all the time. You can have it the other way around. I've definitely worked with kids who have trouble knowing when they have to go to the bathroom, and people think it's a control thing. And sometimes it's actually just a totally their sense in their body and not realizing what's happening. And so interoception and understanding it can really help us better understand working with our clients in a full body kind of way. So I'm going to teach you one trick that I love to do with both my kids at home and my kids here, to work in interoception a little bit. It's called turtling. Actually, the child you saw playing the trampoline drum earlier really inspired me over the last few years to take on a love of turtles. He explained to me that for him, if he could be any animal, it would be a turtle, because he would have his house on his back and he would be able to hide or take a break when he needs to. So we worked together a little bit on how can we do that even if we don't have our house on our back. So I'm gonna do the best I can to show you this in a desk chair. But basically the idea is that you're just going to get into a turtle, and you guys can try this too, but you can watch first if you want. You're gonna put your knees up, you're gonna put your head in, you're gonna hug yourself. And while you're a turtle, you're gonna do whatever you need, right? You're gonna breathe, you're gonna talk to yourself, you're gonna scream, you're gonna be in your house. And then when you're ready to unturtle, you're going to come out of your home and your shell, and you're going to come back. And sometimes some of my kids, I'll just say, turtle, you need a turtle, and we'll turtle, and then we'll come back, right? It's such an empowering way to think about working in interoception, because it's not saying, go think about this, or go be mindful, or count to 10. It's be a turtle, and let me know when you're ready to come out. So feel free to try it, but I think you got this. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to create sensory-friendly environments in the places that you're working. Sometimes there are things that are obvious, and sometimes there are things we don't even think about. So, for example, in both the spaces, we have two locations of the sensory space, and I am not thrilled with the lighting in either one. It is very fluorescent and bright and in your face. So we don't always turn on our big lights. We have a rainbow lamp in our playroom so that kids can choose how much or how little light, how much color. We have lights that make stars on the ceiling and things like that if they want to be in more darkness. You want to have options to make things quieter, like noise canceling headphones, flexible seating options, things like wobble chairs, or they make large rubber bands that can go around the bottom of a seat that a child can press their feet into to get movement in a classroom or at a desk. Weighted blankets or stuffed animals. I think you guys might be able to see my cheetah in the background. We also do activities here with kids where they bring in their own favorite stuffed animals, and we unstuff them and fill them with beans or pellets. And they actually get to take their animal that they already love and make it into a weighted stuffed animal. And of course, I've become a fidget connoisseur in taking on this role and learning about different fidgets and how they serve different kids. But that is just touching the surface of how we can make our environment more sensory friendly, especially depending on the population you might be working with. So we're going to get into another breakout room, and I want you to think about these three questions. One is, what are you currently doing to support neurodivergent clients? What would you change in your current practice setting to better support neurodivergent clients? And what tools could be used in virtual settings? So I just did, some physical exercise with everybody here in a virtual setting. We've done things where we've sent things home, but I think there's more to be thought about. So we're going to give everyone again about 10 minutes, and you'll receive a prompt when your time is running out to think about how you would make your work environment or home, depending on what brings you here, or both, more sensory friendly and neurodiversity affirming. So we'll give you about 10 minutes. very curious to see what people had to share. Yes, weighted blankets. We have regular blankets and also lap blankets and animals. Walk breaks, ice cold water breaks. Yes. And something interesting I learned in working with an OT, if you drink from a straw, it is more grounding because it has this effect on you that it centers your face to take in drinking from a straw. So I will often recommend drinking ice cold water with a straw as a grounding and alerting activity. I love the idea of the in-home visits and ask the kids what they like and allow them to show you, having the sensory experience based on them and their own needs. Stress balls, therapy dough, fidget spinners. I don't know if anyone's ever made oobleck. It is so fun and very easy to clean up, easier than slime. It gets messier, but it's easier to clean. It's just baking powder and water. If you Google how to make it, it can be soft when you play with it and gooey, and then when you hit it, it gets hard. So it's a really fun therapy dough to create yourselves. Quiet spaces, very important. Not only in terms of in the office, but we work with families to create those at home, to create nooks or tents or spaces that their kids can go and have quiet space. We have a body sock here. I love a body sock. For people who don't know what that is, it's just what it sounds like. It's just a big Lycra sock that fits your whole body. My kids both have them at home and sleep in them often. Learning to play musical instruments. Yes, music is sensory in all the ways. You saw that with the young boy in the video and having different options. We have boom whackers here, which are like long plastic tubes. And when you hit them, they make different notes. Kids really enjoy that experience. Yes. Oh, let client rip up paper, smash it and throw it. I just had a client do this the other day and it wasn't planned, but it was very effective. So yes, that's a good one. Yeah, I like somebody say near that, getting creative with what we have. It's very true. Like paper and ripping it up. You don't need, something fancy to do that. I save packing material from every package because what a good stress release, either the little bubbles or the big ones are good for stomping. It adds a whole nother element. Lighting, I see a lot of no perfumes or scented lotions. That's really important. I used to have a diffuser in my office years ago, but I stopped because some kids, while they loved it, other kids found it offensive when they came in. So I will maybe keep oils in my office that kids can enjoy themselves, but not diffuse it into the whole room in case not every child wants the same scent. So I think that's most of those results. One thing here we go. There's more. Yes, wiggles chairs, putting tennis balls on the legs of chairs. Tennis balls in general can do many, many things. For throwing, you can also cut little mouths into them and make them into worry eaters, which do fine motor and eating and all the things. Yes, whiteboards. We have areas for whiteboards. We have a large chalkboard wall in one of our spaces, areas for writing and drawing and exploring. We use window paint in one of our offices and let the kids decorate the windows. Silly putty. Yeah, all putties are putties of different strengths and textures. Using virtually tools you may use in person for breaks like Play-Doh. I like the idea of thinking about virtual. When we opened the sensory space in February of 2020. So we were open for about a month before we went virtual for 3 months, which was unexpected and not, our population is not necessarily best suited for virtual. But if you need to do it, there were ways. We sent home to the houses of the kids we worked with some of these tools here, different textural tools, helping them create those spaces in their own house and then do therapy from there, sitting on a bean bag, elephant stomping across, the screen. There's a lot of different ways to do virtual. And also letting, your client lead the way. Maybe they want the camera on, maybe they don't. And, letting them show you what sensory stuff they have, which I think someone said earlier. So these were all great suggestions. Weighted vests, also compression vests, compression clothing underneath can be really helpful. And there's some really great companies out there that make weighted vests and compression clothing that's very trendy. Because often neurodivergent people don't want to have to stand out for wearing something or being different. And something to think about that I say a lot when I'm at schools is this, to think about the idea of universal design, in the sense of we don't want to simply give these things in a classroom or a room of kids. We don't want to accommodate our neurodivergent kid. When we only accommodate our neurodivergent kid, we're often being ableist because we're having them stand out for having these things, right? So we want to create communities and classrooms and places that all kids can have access to these things. And then our neurodivergent learners can benefit from them. And so can everybody else. I don't know anyone who doesn't love our swing, or who doesn't love a fidget, or who doesn't benefit from some of these interventions. So we're going to go back to the slides. But I think we're actually going to move to a quick break. Yes, we're going to have another quick 5-minute break. And then when we come back, we are going to learn a little bit about play therapy and some parent interventions, and have a little time for questions. So go turtle or elephant stomp or use the bathroom, whatever you need in the next 5 minutes, and we will see you. We are going to talk about play therapy and play activities. I love to play. I hear some background noise if someone's not muted. There we go. So we love to play here, and we're all play therapists at our practice, and have all been have been certified in what's called play therapy. Play therapy was created by Dr. Robert Grant. It is the first play therapy model designed to be neurodiversity affirming. So in general, play therapy can be very neurodiversity affirming, especially child-centered play therapy, but play therapy was specifically designed with that in mind. It's an integrated family therapy approach to help address the mental health needs of autistic and neurodivergent children ages 3 to 18, including ADHD, social anxiety, sensory regulation development, and physical disabilities. I highly recommend people look further into play therapy. Think about completing the training in this. It was a really great experience for me. It's a really nice balance of non-directive tools mixed with neurodiversity affirming activities you can do that give you some tools in terms of working with children in the office and in the playroom. And we will explore one of those today. I think it's important to understand the difference between affirming and controlling play. For a professional to say they are using play, but controlling the play, usually from an adult perspective, the child does, and the play the child does, and using play manipulatively to coax the child into another protocol is neither understanding nor affirming the play of autistic and neurodivergent children. So the goal is not to use play to change children or to fix them. It's to help connect and forge relationship and build social connection and build emotional awareness, right? Those pool noodles you saw my client playing on the drum earlier are part of a play activity where you sword fight with pool noodles. You wouldn't necessarily say, that sounds like therapy, but it is, because to pool noodle fight, you have to have body awareness. You have to see where the other person is, and you have to be in connection with them. So there's a lot of ways to do that that are unexpected and playful. without being controlling. Another great one that he does that's similar is body bubbles, where you take bubbles and you call out different parts of the other person's body. You can do it back and forth with your client, and you have to hit that part of the body with bubbles. And it's just, again, adds to that body awareness and connection, and it can get really silly and fun. So we are going to do one of these play activities in your breakout groups. Another great opportunity for everyone to get a little bit vulnerable. I will do it too. So when you come back, you will see mine. What you're going to do with your Post-its that I hope you have, and if you don't, you can just write it on a piece of paper, is you are going to write down 5 strengths about you, and then you are going to stick them to yourselves. If you do this in person, you stick it all over your body, right? But if you are doing this virtually, you can just put it where people can see, right? So I might say, one of my strengths is that I am passionate, right? And so I'm going to put that here in a place that you can see. And when we do this, I either do this individually with a kid and we talk back and forth and we say, oh, you have that strength. I have that strength. Oh, you have that strength. That's different. Tell me about that. I also do this in groups, and it's amazing to watch the kids walk around and say, you feel that way? I feel that way. You're funny. I'm funny. Right. And it can be really amazing. The kids and the adults I've done this with over my trainings have a much harder time thinking of strengths than they do about their insecurities. And that's why I like to challenge adults to do this too. And also why I have a Post-it on my head right now as I'm talking to you to model for you that we need to get silly with them. So you are going to get put into breakout rooms, and you are going to put on your strengths, and you're going to share them with each other, and you're going to talk about your different strengths. So enjoy, everybody. I'm so happy to see some of you in here. I see Asher and Trisha and Alexandra with some of your strengths on you. I'm happy to share some of mine. I put brave and playful and passionate, and what else did I put on my face? Driven and welcoming. It can be uncomfortable to us both to be on a screen doing this and to talk about our strengths. We're much more used to talking about our challenges and our struggles. And probably the same for most of our neurodivergent clients are not taught to think about their strengths so often, right? They're often taught to think about their deficits. So we are going to do a poll question about this experience. And then but please hold on to your strengths, because I'm going to ask you to use those in a second as well. But we just want to know how that activity felt to everybody. So in one word, let us know how that experience was for you. And when you finish that, I'd love people to type some of your strengths into the chat so we can share both those things. So if you had funny or playful or smart, whatever you had, type some of those words into the chat so we can share in our strengths. I see problem solver, empathetic, humorous, multitasker. Oh, that's a good one. Artistic, creative, kind, determined, silly. I love silly. Organized. Ugh, I wish I could say that was one of mine. Resourceful. That's a great one. Adaptive, athletic, good advocate. How important in the world of these clients we work with. Playful, open, thoughtful, kind, approachable, resilient, flexible. Flexible, I always talk about being able to be both have structured flexibility when working with neurodivergent clients, because they thrive off of structure, but life has to also be flexible. All right, Kara, we can end the poll so we can see how this activity made people feel. Ooh, dependable, compassionate, friendly, humble. Some great strengths here. I like the honesty here. We have uncomfortable and awkward, and also empowered and fun and shy. And this was hard. It was connecting. It was challenging. It was silly. It felt comfortable, which is unusual for me when talking about myself. Awkward, challenging. Yeah, I think all of these experiences are the way different people feel about having to sit in a room and identify our strengths together. I like this. It was helpful to discuss shared strengths as mental health providers. Think about if you do this in a room of neurodivergent kiddos, or actually adults too. They might find some shared strengths that they didn't even know were strengths, right? And be able to define things as strengths that maybe, I have a kid who is incredibly good at Super Mario. Would his parents say that's his greatest asset and strength? Maybe not, but that can still be his strength to him and a source of pride that he could share with others in his group. So these are very honest answers. Happy. I hope this made some people feel that way, even though I know it made others feel uncomfortable. Do we want to scroll down on this, Kiara? Is there any more that I'm missing before we move back? There we go. Understood. Yes, that is such, isn't that the goal of all the work we do? To help the people we work with feel understood. Stressful. Isn't it interesting how the same activity can make someone feel stressed and another person feel understood? Really tells you about how diverse this group is and how diverse any group of clients you're most likely working with would be. So we're going to go back to the slides. Thanks again for just such vulnerability throughout this training. I really appreciate it. And I think your clients most likely do as well. So we're going to talk about supporting parents. One of the questions that came up earlier was about, should we ask the client before we assume identity first language, right? I work with a lot of parents who come in and say, my child was diagnosed, a little on the spectrum, but they're really high functioning and everything is okay, right? I don't immediately correct every statement that they made because that's not meeting them where they are, right? So eventually we will get there, but we're just starting from, where did you learn this information? How can I be supportive? What are the goals here? So parents, just like kids, just like us, are learning and are learners in this, and we want to support them where they come to meet us at. So this is a quote from a book called Good Enough by Dr. Becky Kennedy. It's not a book about neurodivergent children. It's a book about parenting, but I think this mantra fits for all parents, but particularly parents of neurodivergent children. So I will say, have my clients in parent sessions. We do our sessions with parents separate from our sessions with kids. We don't mix it together to give the parents the opportunity to say what they need to and speak honestly without doing that in front of their child. And in those sessions, we might say this mantra together. This feels hard because it is hard, not because I'm doing something wrong. Self-compassion is what makes parenting feel difficult instead of impossible. I know for me as a parent, this resonates so much. I'm the coach of my twins' baseball team, and I had to call my son out the other day, and he was not pleased with me, to say the least. And I had to stick to it, and I had to parent in a certain way. And while other people in the field might have done it differently, I went over, reviewed our choices, and I stayed calm, and I was thoughtful, and I gave sensory input if he wanted or not. I let him get out what he needed. But that was way harder than just yelling and kicking him off the field, right? So it is hard because it's supposed to be hard. And that reminder can make parents really feel seen and heard, which is really the goal in working with parents of neurodivergent kids. You're helping them feel seen and heard, because the world that isn't built for their children isn't built for them either. When I took my son to birthday parties and it was impossible, the other parents didn't understand me either. And it was really, really hard. So one parenting tool we usually start most of our parent work with is called ACT. It's from Dr. Gary Landreth, who started child-centered play therapy, which I said earlier, it was not designed to be neurodiversity affirming, but is in the sense that it's child-centered. And so I think this is something that can be very helpful in working with neurodivergent kids, because it's very clear and it's not punitive, and it's directive but empowering at the same time, right? So you're feeling upset right now that, we need to get off Nintendo. That's acknowledging the feeling, right? Communicating the limit. You have 2 minutes to get off. And then you can decide if you want to have a grilled cheese or spaghetti for dinner, right? Or you can decide if you want to have dinner and then have a break, or have a break and then dinner, or dinner and then a break. If we don't acknowledge the feeling first, everything else doesn't matter, right? We have to connect first. Otherwise, we're dismissing what the child is telling us they need. Communicating the limit, we have to be super clear. We can't expect our children to read our minds, right? And we have to give them, I give a 5-minute warning, a 3-minute warning, a 2-minute warning, a 1-minute warning. Sometimes my kids say, Mom, we know. I say, I know, but it's easier for you to really, really know than it is for it to come to be the time. And then we have to fight about it later, right? And then targeting choices is empowering, as opposed to saying, do it this way, right? We're giving them some onus in how things go. Someone wrote a question about limiting time. We use sand timers here that are amazing. They make sand timers, and get them on Amazon, that do 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 3 minutes. I can't even tell you, I don't know why this is, but we have a group that we run for 4 to 5-year-old autistic neurodivergent children. When we put the timer on at the end, they all sit around and watch the timer and leave. Like, they just love the timer. There's something about that experience. So anything that children can see and appreciate. And I think it's also part of the consistency. You'll hear in the room, first the timer, then we put on shoes. First the timer, then shoes, then we go home. It's we get used to that. So there's a lot of ways to set the limits in ways that are very affirming. So planning for events, right? I saw when we were coming up with things that could be challenging, people had put sweet 16s, birthday parties, things like that. And yeah, it can be truly challenging. My son was in a wedding when he was 2, and it was one of the most challenging experiences of his life, and probably mine, to get him down that aisle. It involved a backpack of sensory tools, every kind of snack you can imagine. And the minute he got through that aisle, I had someone grab him and take him out of there to go regulate, right? So there's a lot of planning involved. So these are 7 steps that I think of anytime you need to go to an event, whether that's a birthday party, a play date, a sweet 16, or even karate for the first time. So the first thing you're going to ask yourself with your child, if they can participate, is it worth it? Right? If it's like, your brother's cousin's second cousin's birthday party, maybe you don't go. But if it's your brother's birthday party or your best friend's party, and you feel like it's really important to be there, then you plan for it. So after you plan for it and decide if it's worth it, you scope out the space that you're going to go to. If you can go there first, that's great. And if you can't, you find pictures. I always suggest to clients that are coming to the sensory space for the first time to go on our website, because we have pictures of what all the clinicians look like and all the rooms look like and all the space, so that they can get a sense of where they're walking into before they come in. Then you're going to find a safe space in that space you've scoped out. So an example would be, I took my son to a gymnastics party years ago when he was really having a hard time. And he really wanted to go. So we found a little like cubby space that was separate from the rest of the gymnastics party. And so throughout the party, every little while he would come to me and say, okay, I need to go. And we would go over there and we would stay there for a minute or two. I'd give him a hug and he'd go back. And it was by knowing the space was there, he was able to use it. And at other times, he might not use it at all. But knowing it's there creates a sense of security, that there's somewhere to go if I need a break or some quiet. You're going to want to always, oh, we lost the, there we go. You're going to always want to front load all the information you can, right? So that's giving all the details you possibly can before an event. There's going to be 100 people there. There's going to be 10 people there. You're going to see your grandparents. There's going to be a dog there. There's going to be music or lights. This is what to expect. It's outside, it's inside, it's going to be cold, it's going to be warm. The best antidote to anxiety about going somewhere new is to have the most information you can. Then you're going to pack your SOS bag. That's what I was talking about with my son, is that might have your fidgets, your calm down tools, your favorites, excuse me, stuffed animal, your weighted blanket. My son used to love vibration. So we had one of those little vibrating back massagers we had to bring everywhere. And we would just sit and vibrate for a few minutes in between things, whatever that might look like. Sometimes that has a snack, because your neurodivergent kiddo might only like certain textures of snacks. Do not count on wherever you're going having that. And as you go to more things and you realize, oh, they would have been helpful if we had that, we bring that, right? Noise canceling headphones. For your older kiddos who maybe are embarrassed to stand out, they make noise canceling ear pods. They don't have to be like big, that they can wear, and it doesn't look like they're wearing anything, but they still are getting that effect. You're going to have an exit plan before you ever enter. So when I went to that gymnastics party with my son, I said, if we need to go and it gets to be too much, you're going to come over and you're going to say, you're going to make the signal. Or if you can't come over to me, I'll keep looking at you. And if you make the signal, which I think it was a peace sign or something of that nature, then we can go outside. And if you need to go, we're just going to walk out. Mostly didn't have to use it, but knowing it was there again creates that sense of, okay, if I need to get out, I can get out, right? If you think about yourself in situations where you go somewhere and you are uncomfortable, having the option to leave is really helpful. I love that someone put earlier a work retreat as a time you might be uncomfortable, right? And that need to be able to have somewhere to leave or to break probably is what gets you through an event like that. And the last thing is, what did we learn, right? So sometimes it's going to be really successful and sometimes it's not. That gymnastics party was a big hit. We went to another party with live animals, and that wasn't a big hit for us. It was overwhelming and too much. And we sat down and we said, what about it was too much? What would we do differently? What can we plan for the next time? And including your neurodivergent kiddo in that conversation, because they're the one who had a hard time. So what do they need different so we can prepare them better the next time? So we want to think about having things like visual schedules and storyboards. These are my guys here. They helped me make this. This is a visual schedule. This is something you can have in the house, in the classroom, in the office. I've had kids that I have schedules for just for therapy. We come in, we read a book, we play, we breathe, we leave, right? So this is just an example of something you might see: eating breakfast, brushing teeth, getting dressed, putting on our coat and hat, right? The idea being seeing it, knowing what's expected and what that looks like makes it easier for me to achieve. You can also make a board about going to school or going to a friend's house. I have we have a close friend who has a son who is globally developmentally delayed and has a hard time going into new spaces. So we took pictures of our house and our family and gave them to him before he came over, so he could study them and know what he was walking into. And I think it was very helpful for him to do that. You know, it's a lot of prep work and upfront work. Sometimes parents say, I don't know if I can do all this. It's so much. And first I validate that and say, of course, it's a lot. But a lot of times doing all of this on the front end really helps us avoid a lot more time and energy on the other end. So I'm going to share with you all a book that I think best explains, describes what we've been talking about today. It's a children's book. Kids love it, but I have found it is most effective to read to parents, because parents are the ones who are really trying to figure out how to be there for their kids in the right way. The first time I heard it, I cried. So whatever reaction you have is appropriate. If we want to turn off the slides so you can just see me, I will share this with you. So this book is called The Rabbit Listened. One day, Taylor decided to build something new, something special, something amazing. Taylor was so proud. But then, out of nowhere, things came crashing down. The chicken was the first to notice. Cluck, cluck, what a shame. I'm so sorry this happened. Let's talk about it, cluck, cluck. But Taylor didn't feel like talking, so the chicken left. Next came the bear. Arg, arg. How horrible. I bet you feel so angry. Let's shout about it. Rawr. But Taylor didn't feel like shouting. The elephant knew just what to do. Trumpeta, I can fix this. We just need to remember exactly the way things were. But Taylor didn't feel like remembering. One by one they came. The hyena, hee, let's laugh about it. The ostrich, go, let's hide and pretend this never happened. The kangaroo, tisk tisk, what a mess. Let's throw it all away. And the snake, shh, let's go knock someone else's down. But Taylor didn't feel like doing anything with anybody. So eventually they all left and Taylor was alone. In the quiet, Taylor didn't even notice the rabbit, but it moved closer and closer until Taylor could feel its warm body. Together, they sat in silence until Taylor said, "Please stay with me." The rabbit listened. The rabbit listened as Taylor talked. The rabbit listened as Taylor shouted. The rabbit listened as Taylor remembered and laughed. The rabbit listened to Taylor's plans to hide, to throw everything away, to ruin things for someone else. Through it all, the rabbit never left. And when the time was right, the rabbit listened to Taylor's plan to build again. "I can't wait," Taylor said. "It's going to be amazing." I love to share that book because whether you're a parent or a clinician or any role you have with kids or anyone you could be working with, I think we all want to strive to be the rabbit, right? Not to interject our fix, but to sit with our clients and our children and be with them and give them what they need. So I'm going to open it up for some questions. I think we had some come in throughout the chat. And then if we have more that come in or you want to write in more, that's wonderful too.
All right, so I can go over, we've been collecting all of them. Thank you to Kiara, who's been the wonderful historian for us today. So first question, regarding the use of identity first language, is this under the assumption the clients want to say it too?
Yes, we are using identity first language in the sense that that has been requested across the board by agencies and that are run by neurodivergent people and organizations run by neurodivergent people. But we're still going to ask, and like I said, with parents, we're going to be patient and help them get to where we are. You know, I was explaining to one of my adult clients the other day, she said, it's taking my mom forever to just use the language that I do, and I want her to do it. And I said, you're so right. And that is so frustrating. But I said, I'm a therapist and I specialize in this. And I was taught something different not that long ago. So we also want to give mom time to learn, because if we just scold mom and get mad at mom, she's not going to get to where we are. So it's a balancing act, right? But we want to be coming from a place that affirms who our clients are.
Thank you. A related comment was this idea that by putting disability first, it seems like we're defining people by their disability. Would you be able to just speak further on that comment?
I think that is to assume that people are not proud of their neurodivergence, right? Even in other parts of the disability world, people are taking back their disabilities and owning them. And it might seem like we're saying, oh, this person is autistic, but we're saying is this person is many things, but they are identifying as autistic as part of their identity and as part of who they are. And we are going to respect that. And, you know, to say that we wouldn't use it is to almost say, well, we think autism is a deficiency, so we don't want to say it. But again, we're going to meet clients where they are and where they feel comfortable.
Thank you for that. And everyone, please continue putting in your questions in the chat. We are still collecting those questions and asking Emma as we get them. So another question, is it possible for an autistic person to have minimal autistic traits and have socialized themselves into appearing neurotypical?
I think I may have answered that one earlier, but the answer was yes, because often we spend our lives masking and we don't even know we're doing it because we become so used to that life of masking and being told that we're anxious and depressed and not being told that there might be something else going on. And that's an opportunity to really revisit who our clients were, you know, when they were younger and when they started feeling that who they were didn't belong, if they can even remember.
And one person, you know, really appreciates you and on everything you've talked about so far today. They are a parent of an autistic child with anxiety and depression. They're talking about how ABA and other behavioral therapies are experienced as traumatic by the majority of the autistic community. How do we center their experience in the evidence base that informs the use of ABA?
Yeah, so ABA is applied behavior analysis for people who don't know. It has been in the past the go-to therapy for autistic and neurodivergent children. The goal is to change behaviors, right? To often through reward systems, charting, things like that. What that does is the reason it's so appealing and the reason it's so evidence-based is because it does change behaviors quickly, but it doesn't actually change. First of all, that's not necessarily behaviors the client wanted to change, but often it's also changing the behaviors without an understanding of why they're there in the first place, and without understanding the trauma that a child or person may go through and feeling that they need to change their everyday behaviors. What's very exciting to see is that OT play therapy or child-centered play therapy or other forms of therapy are also evidence-based and producing journals and articles to show that. And so we can find other effective means. It's just often explaining that that goes much slower and involves the whole family unit as opposed to just changing the identified patient, which can be really hard. I know we have a lot of clients who are like, you know, my kid's been seeing you for like 3 weeks and they haven't changed yet. I'm like, yeah, it's not exactly how this is gonna go. So that can be hard. And listen, I get it as a parent. Sometimes I wish I could get that magic wand that's like, can my kids just listen and cooperate all the time? And, you know, all of that. But it's harder, and it's explaining that. And I have clients who are adults that I work with who have been through ABA or behavior change. And now it's really giving them the space to talk about it and the trauma that they felt and sort of reprogramming them to be okay with stimming, for example, or certain behaviors that they may have done in the past, so that they don't have to live a life where they feel like they have to mask those anymore.
You know, even thinking about masking, then how can we explain to neurodivergent children the difference between how the world is in therapy versus how it is in school, for instance, because this person is commenting how the outside world is not adaptive yet.
So I did a training with Dr. Grant, who started All Play Therapy, and he gave the most beautiful answer to this question that I use all the time. So he was actually talking about his son and his struggles with this teacher at school, because the teacher was very into eye contact and you sit in your seat and you follow the rules. And obviously that didn't align with his therapeutic beliefs and all that. And he sat his son down and he said, you know, for some reason, your teacher has their own struggles and challenges that lead them to need to run their classroom this way. And while that might not be what we think is best for you or for other children, we have to have empathy for who they are and how they are this way. So how can we get through the school day and then you can come home and we can create an environment for you to be comfortable after you have that day, right? I thought that was like such a good way to think of it, because I can tell you, I do a lot of work in schools, and some teachers are so amazing and so on board. More teachers than not are on board and excited to change, but not every teacher and not the whole system at large is going to take a very long time to shift. So it is teaching our children, like, yeah, like my son, not the one I've been talking about, my other son, he hates lines at school and he doesn't understand why they always have to walk in single file lines. And I'll say, yeah, I actually don't think lines are the best thing either. Like, I think that there's something to be said about learning how to walk in a group, because that's the way we walk in life. But I don't tell him don't walk in lines at school, because what's going to happen? He's going to end up in the principal's office, and that's not good for anybody. So I say, I hear you. Lines don't make a lot of sense to us, but schools have had them for a long time and they're not really sure how to run without them yet. So sometimes we have to work within that. And it's creating that bilingual, trilingual ability in our kids as well, to know that we can't always change the world for them, but the world when they're with us, their family in certain environments can be that way. And then teaching them not to feel like they're deficient when the world isn't that way when they're in it.
I love that. Thank you, Emma. I'm definitely going to listen to this part of the recording again so I can really take that in. And I see a lot of folks nodding their head a lot as you were speaking as well. So thank you for that. And thank you to your mentor, it seems, for really offering that. On a related question, actually, about responding to teachers, how do you respond to teachers or others when they express concern about stimming behavior being a distraction in a group setting?
Yeah, that's a challenging one. I wish I had like an easy answer. Again, it depends on the classroom and the teacher. I've had some amazing educators I've worked with who teach the whole class what stimming is. That's always my suggestion. And then when that happens, the rest of the class doesn't say what's wrong with that kid or that's distracting. They say, oh, like Johnny's having his moment. We can all put on our noise canceling headphones, or we can all take a breather, or, you know, whatever, or, oh, that's just how he communicates, and I'm going to do my stretching too. That's the ideal world when you have that teacher. You know, when you don't, or when you don't have that world, or, you know, you're in a place, it's again, that same idea of teaching your kid when you're in that environment, they might not understand this need. That doesn't mean it's wrong. That means it triggers something in them. So when you get home, you can do what you need and be who you need. And we will continue to advocate, you know, for you being able to be that in other places. Also, I would recommend for sometimes those kids, if they can get OT services in school, or movement breaks in their IEPs or 504s, or anything that gives them opportunities to have sensory input and get out of the classroom. That, first of all, those things can decrease stimming, but it also gives them an environment where they can stim safely. So it's both advocating for services in school and teaching them where they are, making sure they know there are places where they can be themselves fully and safely.
Thank you, Emma. And as I heard you speak, I'm thinking about even ideas for further webinars. So everyone, as you fill out the eval form later, please write down your suggestions on what you might want from CTAC, from Emma, maybe, right, in the future. So really think about what is inspiring you to further engage and learn in all this. I want to ask another question from someone that does relate to this idea of students and youth who might become overstimulated. What are some interventions for autistic teens who might become what others would describe as physically aggressive when they're overstimulated?
So physical aggression can be really challenging. So the first thing I would say is, if you can get your child into services before they're a teenager, that would be ideal. Right. And then I'll talk about teenagers, just because the number of times we have seen a smaller child exhibit aggressive behaviors, and if they're not treated, they just become a larger person who's more dangerous doing those same behaviors without tools. It's a lot harder to challenge it as they get older, right? Instead of having the tools when they're younger. However, for our kiddos that come in here with physical aggression, whether younger or older, we try to, teach things that can let that physical aggression out without it being at a parent, such as the stomping. We keep a punching bag in the office. A lot of my clients have them at home, a pillow to scream into. Again, that idea of targeting other choices rather than don't do this. My body's not for hitting, but you can hit this punching bag as hard as you need to, right? And the other piece is that I go over with families all the time. Do not tell your kid to use these tools only when they're angry, because then what happens is they associate coping with anger, right? Every time I'm angry, she says, go use that, freaking punching bag. I hate that thing, right? Instead of, I recommend like 10 minutes a day, you make fun time to do those coping mechanisms or regulation techniques as a fun activity, so that it's sort of like flexing that muscle, right? The more it gets flexed, the more we can use it later. Once a kid is already aggressive, there's no tool in that moment other than walking away or protecting yourself, being in a locked room, doing what you need, and then later targeting that behavior and understanding it and giving other options and interventions. So the therapy has to really be in a different moment in time, and always remembering that the goal is to first connect and then figure out how to help. So in the moment, it's not to be punitive. It's not to say that your physical aggression is bad or wrong. It's, I love you and I can't be with you when you're unsafe. Let me be with you and let's talk about this. So connect and then do the work.
And to really keep going with the advice giving on different situations, do you have any advice for how to engage with or right ways to ask questions for folks who have cognitive delays and are autistic?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's no right ways, unfortunately, to do anything. There's just different ways. But I would say, so with kids we have with cognitive or developmental delays, we don't ask them questions. We play with them. If you start to study All Play at all, in All Play, there's a technique called Follow Me, which is really just following the child and reflecting what they're doing. And it's much more in depth, but that's the basis of it. The idea being that you're just sometimes just having that rabbit be with you and be totally focused on your experience and reflect what you're doing actually heightens your awareness to who you are and what you're doing, and has major therapeutic value in and of itself. I'm very much of the belief that unconditional positive regard is the most important part of therapy with anybody, especially children. And so there is therapeutic value in a child being in the room and feeling loved, period. Right. And so that for some, depending on the cognitive delay or developmental delay, sometimes that is the therapy.
I really also want to say I love that you brought it back to the rabbit. For everyone, I think many of us are picking up on the fact that we should all be like that rabbit today, if anything, right? Really good question from someone. Do you have any recommendations in activities for students who struggle with going inward with, yoga and mindfulness due to trauma?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, sometimes when it's trauma-based, they may need to do trauma therapy outside of the sensory integration and then come into it. So that might be like EMDR or other forms of trauma therapy. But sometimes it's the same idea of we don't have to go inward yet, right? You don't, what I love about sensory integration meeting emotional regulation is that it doesn't have to be, you can do alerting activities and you can be on the swing and you can get more aware of your body and how it feels in different moments without having to talk about your trauma, right? Or without having to explicitly talk about it. Your body is talking about it. Your body is doing the work just by becoming more aware of when you are hungry or tired or have any kind of need. You're doing that work. And that comes from having that input and that sensory integration and that ability to better understand what your body is telling you. So, like anything else, we can't force the client inward, but there's a lot of tools, if the body is so powerful. So we might think that we're not going inward, but that cold glass of ice water with the straw might be alerting our client's whole body to realize where they are in the moment. And that's something too,
And so even with this idea of sensory integration, someone was asking how they would want to create a sensory space in their own home. Are you aware of any funding or grant opportunities to help with something like that?
I'm not aware of funding or grant opportunities. I do think if you get services through like OPWDD, there is some funding for things like that. However, I just want to let you know also, you can make an incredible sensory space in your house on a very limited budget. And I think that's important to know. I have an unfinished basement with $35 swings hanging off the ceiling in my house, where I don't have to worry about the kids falling on the floor quite as much because it's my own kids. We have a crash pad and a mini trampoline. We have scooters, but we also just have endless space to roll, and we make slime and fidgets and tools. And, a lot of it is not the stuff, it's the space. if you don't have a swing, a rocking chair can be a very similar experience, right? Even having just a body sock gives your child a space to just be. And if you don't have a body sock, put them in a giant pillowcase, get a sleep. If you have a sleeping bag, there's ways to create sensory supports without, like I said, the handprints around, it's your whole, we can all be so supportive of our children's sensory needs in ways that, you don't need a lot. You can make chalk sensory paths on your driveway with just a piece of chalk. You jump here, you climb over this obstacle, whatever the thing is. Tight hugs, you can give that to your child if that's what they like. So, it's more about having a space where your child can be who they are than it is so much what's in the space. And then if you can fill it with things that, meet these needs, like a swing or a rocking chair, things they can squeeze, things they can jump into. But, it doesn't have to be what our sensory room is at the office.
So, I know you've been talking a lot about working with youth. How does everything we talked about today apply to adults?
I think that's critical. First of all, if you're working with neurodivergent youth, there's a very good chance that you're working with neurodivergent parents. They may or may not be aware of that, but that may be there. And so you want to think about the fact that they were probably the kids we're talking about who didn't get all of this support. And I just find that that cultivates a level of understanding and empathy in my work with parents and adults, that first, I also have to help them figure out what, maybe they're sensory avoider and their kid is is screaming all the time and everyone's telling them to be calm. And that's really not very easy, right? And I think, I work with my neurodivergent adults are truly my best teachers, because they are explaining to me what happened in their childhoods and how it led to them to be where they are, and how they want to see the world be different, and what, they want it to look like. And I think a lot of that work is really validating, listening, and also encouraging that bilingual, trilingual way of being, because, as much as I'm going to be affirming of this in this office, the world may not be. And how can I let you know that you always have this safe space here, but I also want to help you know what it might look like out there. So that front loading that we talked about when you take a kid to a party is the same thing when you might be talking to an adult about the job force or things like that. It's really recognizing that in your office, they have that unconditional positive regard, and in the rest of the world that they might not, and how to be supportive in navigating that. And, it's not just kids who need the rabbit. It's, our adults actually probably need the rabbit more because they didn't have it and they had all those other animals telling them what to do for all those years. So it's giving them room to sort of let out that inner child and help sort of redo the work so that they can mask less and be themselves more.
Wonderful, Emma. Thank you so much. I think that we all probably need a rabbit for all of us as well. And so, we all need to elephant stomp multiple times throughout the day. And we need to all understand our own strengths. So I even appreciate what you gave us through your presentation today. Someone did ask as we close out if there's any resources for an ADHer in Long Island. Do you work in Long Island?
I'm in Poughkeepsie, but I could definitely do some research and get back to you on that. Unfortunately, there's a lot less resources available in this world than I wish there were. So if people are inspired by this training today and want to create more neurodiversity affirming practices, go for it. And yeah, you can follow us if you want to learn more about the sensory space or what we're doing or upcoming trainings that I'll be offering. You can visit our website, sensoryspacepk.com. You can follow us on Facebook, The Sensory Space, or on Instagram at The Sensory Space. Thank you guys all so much for being here today and for going out in the world and being the rabbits that clients need.
Whoops, sorry. As mentioned earlier, you will receive confirmation email when your CE certificate is available on the online portal after you've registered. As a reminder, registration will open tomorrow, one day after the webinar. You will have to log on to the NYU Silver Continuing Education online portal and click on your registrations tab at the top of the page, and then you will be directed on how to download your certificate. For questions, please call this number 212-998-5973 or email silver.continuingeducation@nyu.edu. Again, these slides will be posted in a few business days along with the recording. We have upcoming offerings. This Wednesday, the 26th, we have a conversation about intergenerational trauma at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and on Thursday, the 27th at 11:30 Eastern Time, we will have a panel discussion about understanding ACEs on the journey to adulthood. Please visit our website for a full list. That website address is ctechny.org, where you can view past trainings, sign up for updates and event announcements, and access resources, including the recording and slides to this webinar, which again will be posted in a few days. Please fill out the survey in the chat box that was already sent. On behalf of CTech and Emma, thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of the day. If you have any other questions, please contact us at ctech.info@nyu.edu. Take care, everyone.
Bye.